Hello, I'm Karina Vanadzina, and I'm a researcher at the Institute of Evolutionary Biology here at the University of Warsaw. Today I will tell you a bit more about my doctoral research at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland, where I was investigating the evolution of parental care behaviors in fishes and also in birds. You might be familiar with research in animal behavior at a species level. So, for example, you might be wondering why pigeons build such loose see-through nests as opposed to a lot of other urban birds. Another approach, which you might not know so well, is to ask how certain behaviors, such as nest building, have evolved and spread across many different species and geographical regions. The world's waters are home to more than 30,000 species of fish, and as you can probably imagine, such diversity is a goldmine for people interested in behavior. Around 75% of fish families scatter their eggs in the open and just leave it at that. But in species where care has evolved, parental investment can vary quite dramatically. As illustrated here by the dark rectangle, in marine environments, this can range from guarding young in the nests. Here we can see some gobies nesting in flower pots, as part of an experiment, to rock gunnels embracing a bunch of eggs, to cardinal fishes that incubate eggs in their mouth, and to seahorses where males give birth to live young from pouch-like structures on their tails. So the fact that the majority of species in fishes do not exhibit care raises the question, so what determines why care evolves in some families and not others? Maybe it is the case that certain characteristics of a species urge parents to stay with their young. For example, if their eggs are large and develop slowly, they would be more inclined to protect their young from predators that are exploiting this situation. But maybe it's the other way around, so the presence of a caring parent leads to larger young. Observations from some fish families show that species with care have larger eggs compared to species with no care, but we currently don't know if this association persists on a broader scale across many fish families. Theoretical studies focus mainly on egg size and suggest 3 different ways in how such interaction between offspring and care might play out. So in the first case, the presence of a caring parent leads to the evolution of larger eggs because the parent gives protection or a safe harbor for the egg to develop in. An increase in egg size means that the young that hatch from these eggs have to spend less time in risky life stages with no parental protection later on. In the second scenario, an initial increase in egg size drives the evolution of care because large eggs develop for longer, which means that eggs are also sensitive to predation and need oxygen during this time. But it's also possible that parental care and egg size do not evolve together and are each caused by a different set of factors. And 2 recent studies that explored this question in marine fishes reached different conclusions. A study in coral reef species found that eggs are larger in species where parents guarded eggs compared to species with no care. In contrast to this, another study showed that global variation in egg size is explained solely by the environment and has nothing to do with the presence of care. They showed that overall across the globe, the largest eggs occurred in cold waters with few nutrients. To better understand how parental care is linked to the size of offspring, me and my team decided to collect a large dataset on the reproductive behavior of marine fish species. Our plan was to analyze the dataset with modeling approaches and also account for the way species are related to each other, that is, their phylogenetic signal in the data. The easiest way to explain what I mean by phylogenetic signal in traits is to think of mice and elephants. If a trait has a strong phylogenetic signal, so the body size is one of them, closely related species will be more similar to each other compared to distant species. So if the species is in the rodent family, it is very unlikely that it will reach the size of an elephant. And I'm interested in explaining the differences that we see between species once we have accounted for this phylogenetic effect. That's basically the whole purpose of including phylogeny in the model. While the model might tell us that offspring size is linked with care, we still would not know if offspring size has driven the evolution of care or if it's the other way around. And this causal relationship was tested using a program called base traits. We selected two widely reported types of offspring size as our response variables. This means that the variation in offspring size, so whether it's large or small, is explained by other factors. Previous studies have focused on egg size, which mainly reflects the contribution made by the mother, but we were also interested in size at hatching or leaving the parent to capture the full impact care behavior can have. Information was sourced from online databases, published datasets, and handbooks. There are several variables that could have an effect on how the size of the young varies. We included predictors such as the maximum size of the parent, as we would expect that bigger species also have bigger offspring. Most importantly, we included the reproductive strategy of the species. We distinguished 7 strategies based on an older classification of reproductive guilds. These can be grouped by the place of egg development, so eggs can develop pelagically in the surface waters, demersally on the seafloor, or in association with parent's body. We distinguished between 2 groups of pelagic spawners. First of all, we have eggs developing separately in open water, and then the more interesting group is eggs developing in floating structures. As an example of these, we have egg rafts or rails where individual eggs are encased in sticky masses and float in the upper layers of the sea. This spawning mode is common among anglerfishes, such as this scary-looking goosefish shown on the right. We also included eggs that have long attachments on their surface that allow them to travel on floating structures, such as tree trunks or crowns, and even debris from the ships. Examples of eggs with long tendrils can be found in flying fish and needlefish families. The next 2 strategies include species that spawn demersal eggs with or without further care for eggs by guarding and supplying them with additional oxygen by quickly moving their fins. The nestlers category is illustrated by a goby and a rock canoe in this figure, but perhaps the best known example is 3-spine stickleback males. The spread out footage from my laboratory experiments shows 2 stickleback males in compartments with light and dark sand that build nests using cotton threads. The male on the left is starting to build his nest on the light side, while the male on the right is building on the dark substrate. In nature, stickleback males build nests from algae that they stick together with a substance called spigin that's produced in their kidneys. And they also take care of the developing offspring by fanning the eggs and providing them with oxygen. Males perform an elaborate dance to attract the female to the nest where she lays her eggs during the breeding season in spring. They readily build nests in the lab if they're given threads and some sand, so they're a great model system for research and parental investment. The last three categories include species where eggs develop on or within the parent. In external bearers, eggs are placed in parent's mouth or in other areas of the body. As the name implies, the pouch brooders eggs are placed in an enclosed pouch-like structure, while in live bearers, development takes place within the mother's body. As part of our research, we discovered an especially large variety of parental care behaviors present in the polar species. These range from classic guarding of eggs to hiding eggs in sponges and carrying them around on fins throughout development. And a recent scientific paper includes a fascinating footage of a nesting colony of ice fishes in the Weddell Sea in the Antarctic, which I will show. And this colony includes more than 60 million nests. And this might be some indication that parental care might be an important way to protect the developing young in these quite harsh environmental conditions. In addition to reproductive strategies, we also included environmental variables that might affect each species in our models. We used areas of where each species is most likely to occur and combined these with a 0.5-degree grid of the globe. This resulted in a large matrix of presence or absence for each species in every grid cell, which was then used to get the average value of the environmental variables affecting each species. And for the purposes of this study, we used 6 variables: mean annual temperature, oxygen and chlorophyll content, and the average change in these variables throughout the year. Chlorophyll content indicated how nutrient-rich the waters were. So the first thing to note about the distribution of data in the completed dataset is that when we compare eggs by the places where they develop, there is more variation in the size of eggs developing on the seafloor or within parental body compared to free-floating pelagic eggs, as you can see here. And that is in spite of the fact that there were more species with pelagic mode of development in the dataset. And this might indicate that there is some optimal strategy for producing a pelagic egg on a global scale. So these eggs develop in changeable environments in the surface waters. And if offspring survival depends on chance, it would be wasteful for the mother to invest a lot in each separate egg with no guarantee that these would survive. And as indicated by the plots showing the range in the distribution in the size of hatchlings, development within body seems to be associated with the largest hatch sizes, but I would need to account for other factors before I jump to any conclusions. If we map the distribution of offspring size geographically, there is quite a clear pattern of larger offspring in the colder regions of the globe, especially in the hatch size data. And we can also map the distribution of offspring size across phylogenetic tree. This graph shows how egg sizes have evolved in evolutionary time on the inside, while the reproductive strategies are shown on the outside ring. So clusters of red branches correspond to larger egg sizes, while the deeper blue indicates smaller eggs. So the clade that stands out straight away is mouth-brooding sea catfishes, with the largest egg among all the salmon species at 2 centimeters in diameter. We also see a smattering of larger eggs in families with guarding behavior, including ice fishes and eelpouts. In other families where parental care dominates, such as in gobies and mouth-brooding cardinal fishes, there is no indication of eggs being larger. So there is no obvious link between the presence of parental care and egg size. I've further tested the relationship between offspring size as the response variable and environment and care as their predictors, using a mixed models approach. In this graph, we are looking for variables that have clearly shifted away from 0 in either positive direction, marked in red, or negative direction, marked in blue. Body size is a strong predictor of egg size. Larger parents have larger eggs. But in line with previous studies, environment also plays a role, with larger eggs found in colder waters with high oxygen content. None of the strategies with parental care have larger eggs compared to pelagic spawners, but we do see that species spawning in pelagic structures or giving birth to live young have smaller eggs. This does make sense because the production of an egg and any extra structures or resources for developing young has to come from the same energetic budget of a single female. And as you can see in this chart, live bearing is the only type of care where females dominate as caregiver in fishes, which explains the smaller eggs, while in other categories, male care is more common. Just to remind you, we collected 2 different types of offspring size, egg size and size at hatching. Interestingly, the results from the model with hatch size as the response variable show that even when all other factors are taken into account, eggs that develop on the seafloor or within the parent's body do result in larger hatchlings compared to pelagic eggs. And this effect is especially strong in species where eggs develop internally. As with egg size, temperature and body size are also important. So far, we have established that species with parental care do hatch at larger sizes, but the causal relationship between these variables is still unclear. We therefore used an algorithm in a software called base traits to establish whether it's the presence of a parent that drives the evolution of large hatchlings or whether it's the other way around. For this method, we have to use 2 binary traits. The hatch size variable was split into small or large hatchlings. For care variable, we first looked at absence of parental care after spawning versus its presence. So according to the previous scheme, the strategies with care would be the ones in the blue box. Interestingly, we found that care after spawning does not evolve together with hatch size, which makes the independent evolution of these traits the most likely scenario. This indicates that demand from offspring does not determine whether parents will stay with their young or leave after spawning, and the presence of care does not lead to larger offspring. One alternative explanation for the emergence of care behaviors is territoriality and the mating system in fishes. If we take our earlier example of sticklebacks, the males of these species hold territories and attract multiple females each breeding season. And this system is fairly typical among fish species that have care. The stickleback nest has 2 main roles, and there can be a trade-off between the 2. So first of all, it has a functional role as a safe space for offspring to develop in. Field studies have shown that males prefer to build nests under plant cover so that they are less visible to predators. And it has also been observed that more exposed locations are used as nesting grounds for larger males that have a higher chance of protecting offspring in these conditions. From this, we could conclude that there is quite a strong chance that offspring qualities do evolve together with parental care. At the same time, the nest also acts as a signal of male quality to the females that pass by in search of a mate. Female choice experiments have shown that females do prefer nests with flashy ornaments rather than just plain ones, even though these nests would also be more visible to predators. It has also been shown that males might provide care not for their offspring's sake, but because these behaviors are again preferred by females. Finally, the faster eggs develop, the more mating opportunities males might get each season. So the fanning behavior of eggs might have evolved to speed up the development of the offspring, rather than to increase their survival. When we take into account sexual selection, it becomes less clear how offspring characteristics could affect the emergence of care on an evolutionary timescale, because it is so tightly linked with the mating system in fishes. Coming back to the previous analysis, if we split the care data set in a different way, by care within parental body versus the rest, there is strong evidence that advanced types of care co-evolve with hatch size. This diagram depicts transitions between 4 possible states you can assume as a species. The state of large hatchlings with eggs developing externally is the ancestral state marked with a star, and we can use that as the starting point. The takeaway from this is that it is more likely to involve advanced care if you have large hatchlings, as in state 3, rather than if you start with small hatchlings, as in state 1. Once advanced care evolves, though, state 2 of having both small hatchlings and advanced care is not stable, and there's a high transition rate back to having large hatchlings. Overall, large offspring does drive the evolution of care. We have established that. But safe harbor also plays a role because care within the body further amplifies selection for large offspring. This project focused on parental care in fishes, but there are 2 takeaway messages relevant for people interested in other organisms as well. We find that the set of factors affecting offspring size do depend on how we define this variable. So, environment and body size are the most important factors associated with egg size. But for hatch size, reproductive strategy also plays a role, with the largest change in offspring size in species with advanced types of care. The definition of care also matters. We find that large hatchlings drive the evolution of advanced forms of care, but there is no evidence that all parental care types evolve together with hatchling size in fishes. I'm including my email address and a link to the full paper if you're interested in finding out more. Thank you very, very much for listening.